In this lesson, you will be comparing budgets of teenagers and young adults. And first, we're going to ask you a question or two. What do you know about budgets? And what experience, if any, do you have related to budgets? So without revealing any personal financial information, just answering these questions in a general sense, please put the video on pause and put your responses in that text area. Then come back when you're ready. All right, so we're going to start with a teenager, ages 16 to 19 years old. So many of you fall into this age group, right? And as far as creating a monthly budget, we want to think about what are the categories of expenses that teenagers in this age would typically have, and that is teenagers who have a job. So if we have a job and we have income, what are we spending our money on? And we're telling you can pick at most 4 categories. Of these 8 categories that are listed, which 4 would you like to pick? You can highlight those. I'll share with you the 4 that I pick, and you're welcome to choose mine or pick your own. I'm picking savings, transportation, miscellaneous, and clothing. Savings is really important at this age group because you're saving up for something else, right? Maybe it's college, maybe it's a car, maybe it's a trip. Transportation, you have to get to your job. Clothing, a lot of teenagers this age like to look good, and miscellaneous, whatever else comes up. So I'm taking these 4 categories, and we're going to come up with a budget, a monthly budget. We are told to assume that teenagers get paid bi-weekly. That means every other week. And in their bi-weekly paycheck, they receive $510. So because we're coming up with a monthly budget, we need to figure out how much money do they make each month. Now, what I don't want you to do, I don't want you to just multiply 510 by 2, because some months have more than 4 weeks. So instead, what we do is we take the bi-weekly paycheck amount, 510, we multiply that by 26, because there's 26 pay periods in a year for people who get paid every other week. And then we divide that by 12 because there's 12 months in a year. Now, this is a process we're going to be using over and over again in this course, so get used to that. Biweekly paycheck amount multiplied by 26, divide that by 12, use a calculator, and we get a monthly income of $1,105. So now with those 4 budget categories that I decided in the previous slide, I'm going to write them down, and I'm going to give an example of each category. So that would be like a savings account. I'm going to set aside 25% of that pay each month, and I'm going to use a calculator. And I'm going to type into my Desmo Scientific Calculator 25%. And I'll notice the word OV pops up, and then I type 1105. 25% of $1,105 is $276.25 each month that this teenager is going to put aside in their savings account. Transportation. Well, that would be like gas and insurance, and so maybe they're helping their parent pay for that, or maybe they're paying for it all on their own. Insurance is expensive. So I'm thinking let's set aside 40% of the income for these purposes. And I'm going to use my calculator. 40% of $1,105 is $442 even. Miscellaneous, that would be like phone and eating out. Let's say 25% of the monthly income goes to miscellaneous. So we've already done that calculation. We can just write it down again. And finally, clothing. That would be like school clothes, work clothes, and what we have to realize is we cannot go above 100%. So when we add the percents that are already there, 25 plus 25 is 50, plus 40 makes 90. That gives us 10% that this teenager can set aside for clothing. And 10% of $1,105 is $110.50. Now don't forget your totals. We already said that the total percents have to be 100, and they are. And when we add up the amounts that we're planning on spending in each category, we can't go above what the income is. And it works out perfectly. So now what we have to do is we have to sketch out our pie chart. Now I know in earlier grades you might have learned about pie charts, but it's been a while. So let's just think about this circle like it's 100% of the money that is going to be spent. So when we think about a circle, there's 360 degrees in a circle. So let's take the biggest percentage, 40%. And if we draw this horizontal line to the right at 0 degrees, we want 40% of 360 degrees. 40% is a little less than 50, right? And we can use our calculator. We get 144 degrees. Now, even if you don't have a protractor, you can visualize 144 degrees because it's more than 90, but less than 180. So right around there. And that is our transportation pie piece. It's quite big. Then we can look at miscellaneous, phone and eating out. That's 25%. Well, I love 25% when it comes to a pie chart because it's just a quarter of the circle. 25% being a quarter. If I did 25% of 360 degrees, I'd get 90 degrees. There's my miscellaneous category. And I could do the other 25%, so another 90 degrees as savings. And that leaves us with that little piece left over for 10% of clothing, representing clothing. So take a look at that pie chart for a typical teenager who is making money but also spending money on these categories. What would happen when this teenager becomes a young adult? So young adult, that would be ages 20 to 34. Now they're making more money, but they are also spending more money because they have more expenses. We have to pick at most 6 categories. Which of these 6 would you select for someone ages 20 to 34? I would definitely pick housing because rent, right? They're going to be maybe sharing rent or having their own apartment. Debt will be a thing for people of this age group because they're probably paying off college loans. Transportation is really important. Sometimes young adults are actually still on their parents' insurance, so we can ignore the medical right now, but clothing will be important. Entertainment, because this age group likes to go out and have fun, and then food and household. Now you'll notice sadly that I didn't include savings. And I say sadly because many young adults, they don't understand the importance of savings. So let's just leave it out for now and see what the pie chart, see what the budget looks like. So let's take these 6 categories and let's take the new paycheck amount. It says assume that young adults get paid bi-weekly and receive $1,350 in each bi-weekly paycheck. So same process. Multiply the paycheck amount by 26 and divide that by 12, and we get $2,925 each month. That sounds like a lot of money. It goes quickly, which is why it's important to come up with a budget. So I've taken our categories from the previous slide, and I've put in examples of each category. If you're using different categories, put in your own examples and your own categories, as long as you have at most 6. Now for housing, I am thinking that is expensive. And remember, we can spend at most 100% of the money that comes in. So the amount that I thought would be 30% of my income, of the income would go to housing. And using my calculator, 30% of $2,925 is $877.50. For food and household, that would be like groceries. Let's do 20% of the monthly income. Again, using my calculator. Transportation, you've got your car, you've got your gas. Insurance actually goes down the older you get if you don't have accidents. Let's save 15% of our income for that, and that'll be $438.75. For debt, student loan, definitely set aside like 15% to pay for student loan. We've already done that calculation. Clothing, it is important to look good for your job. So let's set aside 10% of our income. And now we're at that last budget category, which is really not a necessity. It's just nice to have. We're going to add up all of the percents that are there and subtract that from 100. That leaves us with 10% only for entertainment, and we've already done that calculation. Now we're going to add up all of our percents, make sure we get 100%, and we do. And then with a calculator, you'll add up all the amounts that you're planning on spending each month and make sure you don't exceed your income. All right, so all of that checks out. So now what we want to do is we want to think about making our pie chart. So remembering that 0 degrees is kind of due east, we have 30% going to housing. So 30% is more than 25%, right? But less than 50. So I'm going to eyeball it right there. And let's call that 30% housing. And 20% is food and household. Well, what's nice is 30 plus 20 makes 50. And 50% of the circle is straight across. So that's going to be housing and food, or household and food, sorry. And now we'll get to transportation and debt. Each of those is 15%. So here's transportation and there's the debt. And that leaves us with 2 remaining categories, equally spaced: clothing and entertainment. So comparing this budget for a young adult against the other budget, what are you noticing? Are there any similarities? Are there any differences? And now what we want you to do is we want you to complete a Venn diagram. Look back at your previous slide and compare and contrast these 2 budgets. Where are they related or similar? That goes in the middle. And how are they different? That goes in the edges. So take a moment, put the video on pause, and write down some similarities and differences. Then come back and let's compare what we have. So I noted that the teenage years have fewer expenses and young adults have more expenses. I noticed that the transportation costs are high for both of these age groups. And now finally, you might have had more similarities and more differences, and that's great. But now we want you to think about this reflection question to close out our notes here. Considering these life stages of a person's life, we've already talked about teenage years and young adult years. What about early middle age, late middle age, and retirement? What changes would you expect to see in the budgets of people at these different life stages? Write down your thoughts. Thanks.